We're always living with it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
every second. But have you ever like really thought about time itself?
Yeah.
Not just, looking at the clock or our calendars or deadlines,
Right.
but like the actual value of time.
Absolutely.
We trade our time for work and we spend it with people we love.
Hmm.
We're always racing against deadlines. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Unlike pretty much everything else, like money
Yeah.
or opportunities,
Yeah.
even like messed up relationships that you can sometimes fix,
Hmm.
when time is gone, it is gone.
It's gone. Yeah. And you know what I always think about?
What's that?
How often we hear the phrase, I just didn't have the time.
Right.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah.
does it really, I mean, is it actually a limited resource, or is it maybe something else about how we look at it,
Yeah.
how we allocate it?
That's a great point. And that's what we're diving into today.
Okay.
That question. To get us thinking about it, I found this story. Imagine someone young going to an older person, and saying, what's the most important lesson in life?
Hmm.
And the elder, instead of giving them some big lecture,
Yeah.
shows them a bucket. And there's a pile of big stones,
Okay.
smaller pebbles, and some sand. And the elder says, fill the bucket. So the young person carefully puts the big stones in first.
Right. Yeah.
Then they add the pebbles, shaking the bucket to get them in the spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, they pour in the sand, which like fills up all the tiny little gaps.
Okay. So full bucket. Right.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
The elder then asks, is the bucket full? And the younger person, looking at this packed bucket, says yes.
Okay.
And then the elder tips the bucket over.
Whoa, hold on. Okay, so everything spills out.
Right. The sand, the pebbles, the big stones, everything's just scattered on the ground. So what's the point?
I'm curious.
The elder explains that the big stones, those are the most important thing.
Oh, okay. I see where this is going.
Our core values, close relationships, our big goal.
Uh-huh.
The pebbles are, the less crucial but still important things.
Right.
And that sand, that's the everyday stuff.
Yeah.
The busy work, the distractions, all that stuff that just fills up our time. But if you don't put those big stones in first,
They might not fit at all.
they won't fit once you've got all that sand and pebbles in there.
Huh. That's a pretty powerful image. And what I think is really interesting is how that connects back to us, to the listener. I mean, think about it. Are you really prioritizing those big stones in your own life?
It's so easy to get caught up in all those little tasks,
Yeah.
running around doing a million things. But are we really giving enough time to the things that actually matter?
The things that give our lives meaning.
Exactly. So then the question becomes, how do we do this?
Yeah. How do we actually make sure those big stones get the attention they deserve?
Right. Because it's one thing to have this nice little analogy,
Yeah.
but how do we actually apply this to our lives? Well, our sources actually offer some pretty practical strategies for time management. And the first one, it sounds really simple.
Okay.
Set priorities. Take a little time at the start of each day or even the week
Okay.
to really figure out what are the most important things that need to get done and make a real effort to do those first.
Yeah. That totally fits with the bucket analogy, right?
It does.
If you don't intentionally put those big stones in first,
Yeah,
your day is just going to get filled up with the less important stuff.
absolutely.
And then there won't be any room left. I think a good way to think about it is, what absolutely has to get done today,
Uh-huh.
and what can maybe wait till tomorrow or next week, or even can someone else do it?
Yeah, delegate. And that kind of leads us into the next idea, time blocking.
Okay,
Have you ever tried that?
I have, yeah. It's basically scheduling specific chunks of time
Right.
for specific tasks. So almost like making appointments with yourself
Right.
to get those important things done. The idea is that when you focus on just one thing at a time, you get way more done.
Yeah. And it stops you from getting sidetracked by all the little things that pop up.
Right, all those urgent but not important tasks.
Absolutely. As you've been looking at these sources, is there anything that makes time blocking really work well? Any tips or tricks?
One thing that comes up a lot is you have to be realistic.
Okay.
Don't try to cram too much into one block of time.
Yeah.
Leave yourself a little wiggle room.
Because,
Well, life happens.
right, things come up.
Exactly. And it's not just about work stuff. Block off time for those big stones too.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Time with family, exercise, hobbies, things you really value.
Yeah.
Make sure you're making space for those things in your schedule.
It's about making time for the life you actually want to live, not just the stuff you have to do.
Exactly.
And that brings us to something that can be really hard for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, what's that?
saying no.
Oh, that's a tough one.
It is. But
Yeah.
our sources are really clear about this.
Okay.
If you say yes to every request, every favor,
You end up with no time for yourself.
no time for your own priorities, your own big stones.
Exactly. And it's not about being selfish.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that you have limits.
And protecting your time.
Exactly.
It's interesting, though, right? We often say yes because we want to help or we don't want to let people down.
Sure.
But the sources point out that always saying yes can lead to burnout,
Yeah.
resentment, and neglecting those things that are important to you.
So how do we actually say no in a way that feels okay?
Right.
Because it can be so hard to say no to people, especially people we care about.
Our sources talk about being polite but firm,
Okay.
offering a short explanation without over apologizing, just being straightforward.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe you can suggest an alternative, like, I can't do that right now, but maybe I can help you with this later.
Right. It's about valuing your time as much as you value other people's time. Right. And understanding that if you're always stretched too thin, you're not really able to help anyone effectively anyway.
Okay. And lastly, we can't talk about time management today without talking about technology.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we live in a digital world.
Right. Our phones, computers, they're with us all the time.
Constantly.
But the sources really emphasize that we need to be smart about how we use technology.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to spend hours just scrolling through social media or whatever.
Right. And it's not about giving up technology completely.
Well-
It's about being intentional.
Yeah. Choosing how you want to use it instead of letting it use you.
Exactly. So instead of just mindlessly consuming, think about how can you use technology to be more productive.
Right. And there are so many tools out there that can help with that.
Totally. Some of the sources talk about setting boundaries with technology, like maybe you only check email at certain times, or you turn off notifications for apps that aren't essential.
Right. Or use one of those apps that tracks how much time you spend on your phone.
Exactly. And if you see that you're spending way more time than you thought,
Yeah.
then maybe you can set some limits for yourself. Even something as simple as turning off your phone for an hour each night could make a big difference. So we've talked about this idea of big stones and sand,
Yeah.
and we've looked at some real practical ways to manage our time.
Right. Ways to make sure we're focusing on what matters.
But here's the thing, and the sources keep coming back to this.
Say.
Time is so precious, but it's also limited. It's constantly slipping away.
Like sand through our fingers.
Exactly. But the good news is, if we're intentional about how we use it,
Mhm.
we really can live richer lives. We can make sure those big stones are what shape our days, not just the endless stream of sand.
It all comes down to making choices,
Yeah.
right? Are you going to let your days just happen?
Yeah.
Or are you going to actually design them, intentionally create the life you want? By thinking about your priorities and using some of these time management strategies,
Yeah.
you're taking control. You're deciding how to spend this irreplaceable resource.
So here's a challenge for everyone listening.
Okay, I like a good challenge.
This week, I want you to take a few minutes and actually write down your top 3 priorities in life. Those big stones.
Okay.
Be really honest with yourself. And then each day this week, just take a minute to think about how you actually spent your time.
That's a great idea.
Did those top 3 priorities get the attention they deserved?
Mm.
Or were you spending more time on the sand and pebbles?
I think just doing that, just tracking it for a week,
Yeah.
will be so eye-opening. You'll see the difference between what you say is important and what you're actually doing.
And that can be a real wake-up call.
Absolutely.
So one final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
After everything we've talked about today, about figuring out what's really important and making the most of our time,
Yeah.
what are those big stones in your life? What deserves your time and energy?
Good question.
And what small steps can you start taking today to make sure they get the attention they deserve? Because time, as we've seen, is both precious and fleeting. It's like sand, always slipping away. But if we use it wisely, if we build our lives around those big stones,
Yeah.
then our lives, like gold, can shine.
Beautifully said.